Hey friends, thanks for joining us with Collaborative Christian Media's Questions Worth Answering. And today we're going to take a look at a little bit of the thoughts from Romans 12:1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. We're going to be talking about a little bit what it means to go beyond a uniform or duty with what Paul talks right there. And he says a reasonable service. It's more of a daily obedience that doesn't change when assignment changes or location changes. Today, I am joined by a friend and a ministry partner, Master Sergeant Daniel Stewart. And he's a Marine, a leader, and someone who understands what it means to live on mission. So, Daniel, thank you for spending part of your Veterans Day here with us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Daniel, before we dive in, can you tell us a little bit about what Veterans Day means to you?
Growing up, Veterans Day was just an opportunity for me to learn more about the sacrifices that our veterans have made. It was always an opportunity for us to just discuss it, even as a family or teacher and student or whatever. But as a veteran now, I think it's just an opportunity, to feel good about, the decisions that you made and the relationships that you've developed over the years. It's just kind of a cool day to set aside and remember. That's it.
I think that's important because I remember Veterans Day, you didn't have to do classwork, right? Like
Yeah.
they'd bring in veterans to talk a little bit about what it means to be in the military or that sacrifice. So I think it's a great tradition as far as the education aspect and making sure that people do really know what the military is about and what that life entails. When we're talking about the phrase that we mentioned, Paul talks about a reasonable service. And I think one of the most challenging aspects of that is realizing that following God is logical, but it's also not extreme. Sometimes we as Christians feel like certain aspects are extreme, but Paul's really specifically saying, no, it's a reasonable service. So I was wondering if you could take a little bit of kind of a comparison there to understand, when we talk about service, a lot of times people immediately think of the military. So can you draw some parallels of what it means for, like, we say reasonable service, of what that looks like for a mindset of a military person?
Yeah, sure. The reason why I can draw a parallel between what Paul's talking about being a Christian and being your reasonable service and in the military being a reasonable service is, you know, truly, I feel like our country is a great country, and I feel like, we're blessed, to be able to be born in this country. We have a lot of what others do not have, and
Sure.
I've had the opportunity to travel the world and see not only you know other first world countries, but third world countries that don't have much at all. And so, I think for those of us that have, signed the dotted line and decided to give back, and that's not just military, but that's police and firefighters and, our local, community volunteers. When we really take a look at what all we gain from being in this country, the opportunity to give a little bit back is quite reasonable.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of what Paul's presenting, that it's reasonable, that you're serving out of love as opposed to guilt. And I think that's, really captures when we talk about military, it's not a guilt to serve, right? You just presented an honor or a love to
Hmm.
be able to serve and give back.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for sure.
Can you talk about just being honest with what service means? Service does come with sacrifice. Can you explain a little bit about some of the sacrifices that a military member might make in their service?
Yeah, sure. I'll speak for myself. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for. I'm not going to speak for a branch or or anybody else aside from myself. But I was raised. My dad was a Baptist pastor, and my aunts and uncles and cousins were all extremely close. Genuinely, I remember growing up really thinking my cousins were my brothers and my sisters, and so
Sure.
doing Christmases together and Thanksgiving and birthdays and those things always meant so much to me. And I'm from a small town, so even the guys and girls that I went to high school with, I mean, I graduated with a lot of people I went to kindergarten with. And
Wow.
so the sacrifices that you make as a military service member is not just the deployments and stuff, because those are rare, right? We have to be at war for that. Your name has to be called for that. I mean, just outside of the realm of a deployment, because that's the extreme example of a sacrifice. Just being away from home, and
Hmm.
and taking your loved ones away from home. My wife is is, she and I are high school sweethearts. And so when she signed up and married me, and we left for Camp Pendleton, she left her family too.
Sure.
And then we take our kids away from their cousins, and so Christmases and New Year's and stuff.
I think part of that, what you just mentioned, is, that time and comfort. It sounds a little bit like it pulled you out of a comfort zone. If you guys were high
Hmm.
school sweetheart, that
Yeah.
that would have been the area you guys knew well. And so the
Yes.
military seems like it pulls you out of a comfort zone.
I was kind of a big deal in Sigaville, Texas, so
Oh no. Oh no. I hope someone gets on here and comments on that.
that's a lie. That's a lie.
So when I think of Christian service, I know that it can pull us out of our comfort zone to some degrees. And
Yeah.
I think of missionaries that they spend years out of the
Yes.
country, similar to, if you got assigned somewhere in Germany or
Yep.
Korea or something like that. It's not just being on the other side of the country, which
Right.
can be hard, but being placed on the other side of the world. So even all of that, like the loss of comfort, we still look at that as like a reasonable service. No guarantee of comfort in the military necessarily, from my
No,
understanding.
one of the most one of the most prominent marketing slogans that the Marine Corps has ever put out. It's a big poster, and we actually have it in the hallway of my work here. It's a big poster, and it's a drill instructor that's just got this look on his face. It's like he's not happy. He's not happy, and he's staring at a recruit, and he's saying, and the slogan is, "We didn't promise you a rose garden."
Nice.
And so truly, I mean, that's not that, like time, comfort, your own personal ambitions, those things you kind of set aside for the greater good. But I think what the military has going forward is, it, like that slogan said, they didn't promise us anything else. This is something that we just kind of voluntarily agreed with. So
So something you and I have talked about before, and I want to mention it here, is that there's no such thing as an ex-marine. That that
correct.
is that is not an okay thing.
No, no.
That it's an identity, not a phase of life, so to speak. And so that has kind of always struck true for me with the thought process is, once you're a Christian, there's no retired Christians, and there's no
Correct.
ex-marine. It's an identity. You have taken on an identity, a choice. You made the choice. Nobody accidentally walks into the Marines, right? Like that is something
Correct.
that they are choosing. You don't accidentally become a Christian. You choose Christ, and it's an identity that kind of comes along with that. So, how have you seen identity shape military people or even Christians, the veterans, even after they step out of active duty?
Man, such a great question. And it's so funny because so obviously today, November 11th, is Veterans Day, but yesterday, November 10th, is the Marine Corps' birthday.
Mm.
And back on November 10th, 1775, we were born in a bar, Tun Tavern, Philadelphia. And one of my Marines actually was at an event yesterday to celebrate the 250th birthday. So it's,
That's a big one.
it's a big one. Yeah, it's a quarter century. I mean, this is a big deal. And they did it in a bar, very, very poetic, you know, and this event was genuinely just to motivate, and it was a community event. There wasn't even any drinking there. It wasn't That's not what it was for. The environment was just to kind of pay tribute, but the event itself was just a community event. And he's down stationed in Miami, and he sent us a video. And by us, I have a team chat with all of my Marines, and he's behind a mic, and he's just talking about, the sacrifice that, military members make, and specifically the Marine Corps has, requires of us. And and one of the things that he talked about was, he did this, these like motivational cadences, and like, all these things, and the videographer, whoever is like scanning the room, and there's probably 300, 350, 400 Marines there, or military members. I would assume the majority of them being Marines. And we're all, man, they're all yelling and screaming all in the same time, doing the
Wow.
cadences together. It's just it's a big brotherhood. So I think, like this identity that you're asking me about, as a Marine, is one of, servanthood. It's one of living exemplifying what it is to be a Marine, and to be tough, but also to have, the back of the Marine to your left and to your right, And there was even a moment in his speech where he said literally, if there's ever a time where you feel like you're alone, or if there's ever a time where you feel like you've lost your purpose, genuinely just look to your left and look to your right now. Like, do it right now. Look to your left, look to your right. You're not alone, man. We've
Mm.
got you. And similar to that, Christians, a lot of times we think, man, we're just in this fight sometimes alone too. And the devil's pretty good at what he does, and the darts that he throws are pretty powerful, and it can seem
Yes.
overwhelming at times. But the reality is, we're not in this alone either. And it reminds me, I was literally watching that speech this morning, and it reminded me of that story that I'm sure you were told as a young child too, of the footprints in the sand, and
Yeah.
how you just feel like you're alone and you're just trudging through life and you just can't do it. And when you get to the point where you can't, Jesus picks you up and he starts walking, for you. And you were never alone. Even if physically on this earth you're alone, you're not alone because, of our Heavenly Father. So I
Yeah.
always thought that was kind of cool.
Those footprints are his that you see when it's only one set. Yeah,
Hmm.
that has always been a really cool image to change perspective, really.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really what it is. The truth was always the truth. Just our
Hmm.
perspective of what we see changes once,
Sure.
someone reminds you. And you mentioned the idea of like a whole bunch of the people together and being able to do the cadence. Is that because that's something that they all like it was part of their past? Is like a heritage
Yeah.
thing, the cadence that they were doing?
Yeah, cadences are something that we chant and sing and stuff when we're on like group runs and like group physical training and things like that. So
So it sunk, like it's
yeah,
something that they did, like maybe they learned that cadence in boot camp or something, but
yeah,
even all these years later it's still there.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely,
That to me is part of identity. When you have something
absolutely,
that is drilled in so strong that they probably, not everybody in that room actually served together, right?
yeah,
They probably don't know each other's names, all everybody in the room, but
yeah,
it's something that's core to the identity that goes through.
yep,
I
yep.
think that to me is
And I
one of
bet they
the
haven't
greatest
done those
things.
cadences in years. I mean, I bet it's been years since they hadn't done them, and all of a sudden, this dude behind the mic is starting it, and it just comes back to you like riding a bike.
Yeah, and I think that's that kind of camaraderie. I don't think that you can overestimate the power of that when you see
No,
that in the military, and I think that is another one of those parallels that can be made for Christians. Like, there are certain Bible verses that you didn't learn them together, you weren't in the same church, but people know them, and
yeah,
it can be used as an encouragement to kind of draw people in. So that's fun.
yeah,
Just being having something in common like that with somebody else. All right, so I'm going to move on to this other idea that I attach when I think of reasonable service. So just see how far out I am. Right, I have zero military background, military service
yeah,
zero. So when I hear from like the news and things like that, and people talking about the warrior spirit, I know that that's more than just being tough, right? So if they were going to do that, they would, like, the slogan would be, join the military, be tough. But that's not what they say. They say a warrior spirit or warrior ethos. Can you describe a little bit about that part of the identity of the military and what that means?
it's certainly something that we talk about a lot in the Marine Corps specifically. In the Marine Corps, we have a Marine Corps martial arts program, and within that program, there are Marine Corps martial arts instructors, and I was one of those. I was a black belt instructor for the Marine Corps martial arts program, and in that training, we're actually taught how to do classes on like warrior case studies. Marines that have been awarded like the Medal of Honor or the Navy Cross or stuff for distinguished service, and we really highlight that with our class of students going through our different courses and stuff, and we talk about the traits that this man or this woman possessed that allowed them to rise above the occasion and do the unthinkable. It's not
Mm.
it's not that they're any more or less courageous than us to the left or to the right. More than anything, I think when I think the warrior spirit or I think of warrior ethos or whatever, I think of something that the military in general, just the Department of War as a totality, as that I feel like we do very well, is we develop a resiliency, and that's not, I mean, that's not to say that every member of the military that's gone through has this resiliency. I mean, there are members of the military that struggle, but for the most part, resiliency is something that we really train to, and resiliency is something that can be learned. And I tell my Marines all the time, I'm so much more interested in how you respond to adversity than how you handle success. I'm so
Oof.
much more interested in how you respond to just getting punched in the mouth, because life is going to punch you in the mouth. Our mission is going to punch you in the mouth. You're
Yeah.
going to get knocked down. And as a Christian, you're going to get punched in the mouth. I want to see how you handle that, man. Like, what's the response to getting punched in the mouth? Are you going to sit there and complain and whine and moan? Or are you going to get up, dust yourself off, clench the fist a little bit tighter, and get back to work, And so when I
What
think
is
about the warrior spirit, that's what I think for sure.
what is something you mentioned a very very key line there. You said that resiliency is something that can be trained or taught. How? Let's say the person, you are that person that you're gonna get punched in the mouth, and that's gonna be it for you. Like that, like, you're not ready for that.
Yeah.
Okay, they're people being honest with each other and with themselves. Like, no, you punch me in the mouth, I'm done. I'm not here for that game.
Yeah.
Okay, what's something that can be done to help build up resiliency?
I think it's just through, and it's terms that I've been in the Marine Corps for 20 years, and this isn't something that I heard when I first came in 20 years. I think that we're getting better about this in particular, and we're getting worse in some other areas, I'm sure. But in this case, I think coaching and counseling mentorship is something that's really come a long way since I've been in, and just knowing your Marines, knowing yourself, seeking self improvement, but having those conversations with your Marines and having those conversations with those that follow you about how to handle that adversity, and those warrior case studies. Hey, don't take my word for it. This is something that happens. This is something that has happened numerous times. Let's talk about Sergeant Dakota Meyer. Let's talk about Corporal Jason Dunham. Let's talk about Corporal Kyle Carpenter, and these guys that we can really develop some resiliency around, because we can learn what they did. We can learn how they responded to things. We can talk about the characteristics that they possessed. And what you end up doing is you end up convincing this person that they are just as capable of exhibiting the same type of resiliency as the person that they just learned about. We're not so different. Our backgrounds are not so, it doesn't matter what our skin color is, or what our ethnicity is, or what our religious background is, or any of that. We are just as capable of acting in an extremely resilient way as anybody else. And that's the same lesson that Christians can learn. It's the same. I can vividly remember going to a visitation with my dad, and my dad told me the majority of the time you knock on a door, it's going to be slammed in your face. Maybe not physically slammed in your face, but what he meant by that was,
Even a polite decline is still a door closed
yes,
in your face. Yeah.
proverbially it's getting slammed in your face, right? And so, you learn resiliency through that, because hey, when the first door shut, we didn't go home. It's not like we walked back to the truck and we turned it on and we said, all right, well, guess
We
guess
did one.
guess that's it for the day. Yeah,
Yeah, sure.
you went to the next door and you knocked. And then you went to the next door and you knocked, and you went to the next door and you knocked. And it might have been a great day if one person gave you the time to have a conversation, and if one person that you went out and visited comes to church the following Sunday and hears the good news about Jesus Christ, then hey, mission accomplished, man. So you mentioned it earlier about perspective. I think a lot of times, when it comes to the development of resiliency, it's not that the person you're talking to isn't resilient. It's the person that you're talking to might perhaps not know that they're resilient, and you might have to
Mm.
help them gain a perspective that they didn't already have.
I think what you mentioned, how it seems like it's almost like demystifying somebody who exemplified courage or integrity. If they realize that these traits don't have to be elite, they are
Right.
they're traits that can be across the board. And just the more you hear of it, the more you see it, the more you
The
realize
more you
that's
talk
something
about it, yeah,
you too can be part of that identity. I think I like the fact that you pointed out how much you guys talk about people who have achieved it and going through. And I'm not sure if I've heard as much in the Christian world as opposed to just Bible characters, right?
yeah,
We
yeah,
learn about Bible characters, courage, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego straight through the fire, or
right,
David and Goliath type stories. But there are still, I would say, some giants of the faith that are living right now, and their
yeah.
testimonies can be very powerful examples. Charlie Kirk being maybe an
One
example.
exactly who I was thinking of, the missionary that went and tried to win the native tribes, in certain islands. I can't remember his name, but he was murdered by this vicious tribe, and his wife ended up going back to that same
I
tribe.
think I think Elliot.
Yes, yes. I mean, these are real time modern day stories of Christians that are living it and dealing with the sacrifices and handling adversity and even not even being killed for it, even being martyred for it. I mean, it's a reality. So
Yeah, it gives a very different context to reasonable service, as
yes,
opposed to reasonable service being showing up on Sunday morning. Yay, you
yes,
got out of bed.
yeah.
It's a
That's a
different
good
kind of.
comparison. That's a really good point that I've never really considered it that way. I mean, that is a Christian warrior case study. We could do a lot better about that. We really could.
So you and I have both seen veterans carry out this identity that they got when they were in the military, the skill sets that they learned. They have taken it, and it's at heart. Like, there's no ex-marine. They spent so many years in the service, and then they continued with a life of service
Hmm.
after the uniform. Probably the man that, when I think of Veterans Day, and the one that I grew up around, his name was William Forby, and he was, one of the longest POWs from Vietnam. Was a pilot, was shot down. When he was finally released and came back, one of the things that, the reason I know the man was because he helped establish the church I grew up in, and he worked on trying to get a pastor to come in and got a group of people together and started a church. I got to work with him on a bus route, and he was faithful. He drove that bus until I think the insurance company said he wasn't allowed to anymore. Like, that was service, and it cold. I mean, Illinois was cold,
Yeah.
but he modeled faithfulness, service, and you knew he was going to be there. He did step up and have things to say at important church moments, and wise people listened.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is carrying that military identity and applying it to a Christian life, even when he was outside of uniform. The same resiliency, the same principles, and things like that. He's that example for me. When you think about how the church can benefit from veterans and their experience and their training, what are some of the areas that you see as making a solid connection between the two? Someone who did very well in the military, who has that resiliency and things like that. Are there certain ministries or opportunities that you think maybe the church could benefit more from, or could make better connections with the people who have, that skill set, or even some of the spiritual gifts that come along with it?
Yeah, great question. First off, what an awesome warrior case study that you've got, and that individual. Would you say his name Forby? Is that was his last
Yeah,
name?
William Formy. He was a
Yeah,
colonel, Air Force.
that's awesome. Yeah. Is he? Sorry, is he still around?
Yes.
That's awesome. Please tell him thank you for me. That'd be great. But I think when we talk about like how churches can leverage veterans perhaps a little bit better, I think that the average veteran, when they exit the military, intangible skills and even tangible skills that could benefit really any organization, and I'm talking leadership. Certainly, every veteran at some point in their life most definitely possessed a servant heart, most definitely aligned with a thought that they wanted to give of themselves for a cause that they felt was greater than themselves, and so I
Yeah.
think that heart of service can absolutely be utilized, by churches across the globe. When I think about my service and the skill set that I've gained or sharpened, even since being in, I think mentioned it earlier, coaching, counseling opportunities, mentorship opportunities, so if it's working with a youth group or a men's ministry would be something I feel like could absolutely be something that veterans could contribute to, and if not, primarily lead, certainly assist. Outside of the standard, like, hey, if the pastoral security team needs some assistance, what I mean?
Hey, but
But
that's real. Like,
it's real. Yeah, it's big.
our church growing up, like, that was definitely military men and women
Absolutely.
who
Yeah.
filled that role, and they they have training that the rest of us, we don't know.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So I think there's a lot of ways. It's hard for me to not it's hard for me to answer a question like that without thinking of myself, and I know
Sure.
that, man, I'd love to work in a youth ministry and have the opportunity to work with middle schoolers and high schoolers and help mold and mentor and that generation most definitely, but
That
collegiate
generation,
ministry. It
Definitely
needs it.
needs people who can instill discipline
You
and
mentioned you're right about that.
resiliency.
You mentioned Charlie Kirk earlier. I just thought about this now. I mean, obviously, one thing that Charlie Kirk did, was the thing that Charlie Kirk did better than anyone I've ever seen or read about, was impacting the college campus,
Yes.
and certainly that was his focus, and that was Turning Point USA's focus, was getting embedded with colleges, and starting to kind of have those conversations there. So even a collegiate ministry. A lot of churches have college aged small groups and things like that. I mean, that'd be an awesome opportunity for, because a lot of veterans, when you really think about it, a lot of veterans get out and they go back to school. Most
Mm,
veterans join the military and they're in for 4 years or five or whatever, and then they get out. The very small percentage sticks around. When we talk about veterans, man, the majority of them are 22, 23, 24 years old and are full time students. So,
sure.
a collegiate ministry would be really smart.
Wow. Yes, that's not something I think the majority of people know, like how
Hmm.
young a lot of the veterans are and that group for churches to reach out to and try to make those connections with. That's
Absolutely.
a really strong point. When you think of that warrior spirit and the resiliency, back to where we were with Romans 12:1, right? The idea of
Reasonable
reasonable
service.
service. What's it look like in practicality? Like, you say punch in the face. And in the military, that's like a legit thing. You could
Yeah.
get punched in the face during training and you need to be able to get back up.
Yeah.
I think you gave the example of like door knocking and inviting people to church where they're just going to say no. But
Yeah.
can you think of any other examples where you feel like we could, as a collective, as a church body, become a little bit more resilient?
Yeah, I think that we just have to talk about failure more often. And we're not talking about it because we hope to gain it, obviously. We're talking about it for us to not be scared of it, and for us to understand that that's a reality. The reality is you're going to fail more times than you're going to succeed. That's just the truth. And right now in my current position, I'm in recruiting, and I'm, in order to like civilian it up a little bit, I'm a recruiting supervisor. I'm in charge of all the Southeast United States. And whenever I get a brand new recruiter that comes through, we put them through some training. And one of the videos I have them watch it's called Rejection Therapy on YouTube. It's a TED Talk, and it's one of the first things that I have them do is we sit. It's a 15-minute video. The Just go look up rejection therapy on YouTube.
Rejection
Yeah,
therapy.
it's
That
something.
sounds like it's going to be encouraging.
He's super funny. He's very engaging. And he just talks about how it was this emphasis that he had. He was scared of rejection, so he went to, in order to get better at it and in order to be less fearful of it, he hit it head on. And that tenet, that characteristic, is something that Christians can learn from. That's something that military members can learn from. If you want to be successful in life, you're going to face adversity. Success is not easy, otherwise everyone would be successful. This is
Sure.
something that you have to earn and create and sustain, and all those things. So as Christians, I feel like we just need to be real with ourselves, and talk about the reality that rejection's real. Don't be scared of it. It's something that you're going to face, and the only way that you get better at it is to consistently put yourself in harm's way. I mean, and by harm's way, I mean being rejected, obviously.
Or failing, setting yourself.
That's it. That's it.
The number one thing I can think of is my family, we all had to learn how to play the piano as a skill set. That was important to my father. I was terrible at
Yeah.
it. But we all had to play church offertory. So, when they're passing the baskets or whatever, and our church would let students or kids play
Yeah.
offertories on like Wednesdays, not necessarily Sunday mornings, right? But on Wednesdays. And so you're up there and you freeze. Like
Yeah.
you're literally doing, the first Noel or something, right? You're just
Yeah.
plucking the first Noel and you get stuck in the middle and all of a sudden it comes out as, We Three Kings or something.
Yeah.
But you get done and the whole congregation is cheering for you.
Yes,
Like,
you did
like,
fantastic.
yeah, you did great. And there was a whole, 6 seconds in between where there was nothing, but you get done and you still have people, other Christians who are coming up and they're like, hey, good job. You're getting better than last time. And I can tell you really worked hard on it. And, the next time you actually play the same song all the way through. And people are just encouraged by your effort, not necessarily
Right.
your quote unquote success.
Right.
There's something to be said for having a zeal and
Yes.
being able to match up with somebody who has a skill set or a wisdom.
Yes.
and being able to mentor and work with that. That's something you mentioned about having good mentors. You know, you have a Marine who's leading the other ones, and kind of helping them and teaching them some of that resiliency. I feel like maybe that's something that as a whole, as a church, that we could work on, because it's,
Yes.
we see it so easily with kids, right? That kid who's learning how to do an offertory, they're plucking away. But
Hmm.
how often do you see an adult who gets up there and is learning a new skill and is
Yeah.
plucking away and is willing to fail publicly? I think that's
Yeah.
part of the grace that we need to give to Christians. Like, yes, we are still learning. No, none of us have arrived, and there's skills that
Nope.
we're always going to continue to
Yep.
develop and
Yep.
do better. Like Sunday school classes. You think
Yeah.
about, you all of a sudden find yourself leading a small group. You never thought you were going to be the one leading a small group.
Yeah.
That moment of,
And maybe
okay,
you didn't even intend to. Maybe your pastor just asked you to, and you out of having that servant heart, you said yes. This wasn't even a goal, perhaps, that you had in your mind. I think it's so cool. You said the word effort, and we've been talking a lot about resiliency, but honestly, effort and resiliency are synonymous.
mm,
They mean the same thing. I think that we just lose sight of all that's required of us in the military, in life as a Christian, is just effort. It doesn't even have to be successful effort. Most of the time, you might not be successful, but
sure.
the effort is what matters. I talk about that all the time. Even I talk about that with my family, my kids. Like life requires effort. And to live a life well requires effort.
That just kind of brought to mind, we're not responsible for the harvest, right? The
Right.
Bible says God provides the increase. We do the watering, we do the planting the seed, obedience, just following and doing what God told us to do.
Hmm.
We've already got our marching orders, so to speak, and then just letting God produce the results. Daniel, thank you for your service to our country and to Christ, and for being an example of what that reasonable service looks like. It's just a solid reminder for me that service never ends, it just kind of changes form. So, if you could just take a moment and kind of give an encouragement to people who are listening, who want to live that reasonable service, but they're either tired or they just feel incapable. Can you kind of leave us with a final thought for those individuals?
Keep referring back to is in Romans 12:1, when he talks about it's reasonable, man. What we're being asked to do is reasonable. I tell my kids all the time, man, you don't get to live the life that you want without hard work and sweat equity. That's not a reasonable expectation. As Christians, we can think the same thing. I mean, if we want to have a powerful Christian walk, that's something that we have to go out and we have to gain that each and every day. And we have to work toward that. It takes endurance. It takes self-sacrifice. It takes this resiliency, this no quit attitude, effort. That we've discussed at length. But just reminding ourselves that what we are being asked to do as a Christian is reasonable.
Well, friends, as you honor veterans this week, take time to think about how you can learn from the warrior spirit that Daniel has presented, that is so core to the identity of all of our veterans from every branch, but certainly Marines. Think about how you can apply that to the Christian walk and how you can apply that to faith. Thanks for joining us today, and hopefully this has been a blessing for you.